The 2023 Formula 1 season was the most dominant in the history of the sport. Max Verstappen and Red Bull were incredibly difficult to beat, and there was just a single non-Red Bull win over the course of the entire season. This dominance has never been seen before, and it was expected that the team would cruise to their 4th World Championship in a row in 2024. But after 8 races in this season, we've seen 3 different teams and 4 different drivers win races, and the Red Bull dominance has been brought into question. So has the 2024 F1 season just got competitive? Let's have a look. My name's Andy, and this is Behind the Drive. The beginning of the end. Red Bull's season has been marred with off-track incidents. The season began with a cloud over the investigation of the team principal, Christian Horner, regarding allegations from a Red Bull colleague. The fallout from this incident was one factor in the team's chief technical officer, Adrian Newey, making the decision to leave the Red Bull team in the beginning of 2025, after nearly 20 years with the setup. And even now, there is doubt over the team's star driver, Max Verstappen, who is also in a position where he may consider his future with the team that has supported him to his 3 world championships. But despite this, the Red Bull team began the 2024 season in the way that they ended the 2023 season as well. Verstappen comfortably won the first race of the year by more than 20 seconds in Bahrain, with his teammate Sergio Perez following behind in 2nd position. The Red Bull drivers were dominant enough to comfortably take that victory, and all the work done by their competitors felt like it had made very little difference. The Red Bull team do have a significant gradient in their driver lineup. Max Verstappen is significantly more talented than Sergio Perez, and as such there are 2 benchmarks for the other teams to aim for. Through 2023, several teams reached a point where they were able to compete with Sergio Perez on a regular basis, and while the Mexican driver did finish 2nd in the Drivers' Championship last season, he was often beaten by drivers from Ferrari, Mercedes and McLaren. As such, to see Sergio Perez manage to secure 2nd position in the opening race of the 2024 season, and then to follow that up with another trip to the 2nd position on the podium in Saudi Arabia, there was a real concern that this season could even be more dominant than the last. The situation began to change at the 3rd race of the year in Australia. Max Verstappen was significantly ahead of his teammate in qualifying as he put his Red Bull on pole once again, and Perez could only achieve 6th on the grid. A brake failure for Verstappen early on in the race left the door open for Carlos Sainz to take the first non-Red Bull win of the 2024 season, with the Red Bull team taking just 10 points from the 3rd round of the year. This was, of course, a rare issue with the brakes, and without this problem there's no doubt that Verstappen would have taken 3 wins from the first 3 rounds of the year. But the fact that Sergio Perez was unable to be there to pick up the pieces when Verstappen was out of the race was the first time that the other teams were able to finish a race ahead of a Red Bull this year. Subsequent races at traditional race circuits saw Red Bull and Verstappen continue to dominate. The Red Bull car was by far and away the strongest on the grid when at a standard circuit. They were pretty much unbeatable, and at this point in the season, it was becoming worrying that 2024 may well be more dominant than 2023. During this time, Red Bull brought their first major upgrade of the season to the Japanese Grand Prix, which was an upgrade that was anticipated from early on in the year to have the potential to take the leading team on another significant step forward. But things would soon start to take a turn. The Miami Grand Prix was the first instance where the Red Bull car was not the fastest at a point through the weekend. Max Verstappen won the sprint and qualified on pole once again, but in the race, the big advantage that the Red Bull car had through 2023 and 2024 was not quite so dominant. One of the main advantages of the Red Bull was that they were able to maintain great race pace on the tyres even as they aged. This is one of the main reasons why Verstappen has a narrow lead at the beginning of a stint, but soon builds up the gap on his rivals as the stint continues. But in Miami, in the final stint following the safety car, Verstappen was not the fastest car on track. The McLaren of Lando Norris took advantage of a cheap pit stop and was leading the race at the restart, and while it was expected that the Red Bull of Verstappen would comfortably be able to overtake the McLaren, something had clearly changed. A trip back to a more traditional circuit type of Imola saw Red Bull take another win, but this race saw McLaren take the fight to Verstappen in qualifying, and, once again, Lando Norris showed excellent tyre management to fight back to Verstappen at the end of the Grand Prix, as the Dutchman won the race by less than a second. So, once again, the Red Bull was vulnerable, but, in the hands of Verstappen at least, was able to win the race. And then, come Monaco, the Red Bull was off the pace once again. Verstappen and Perez were complaining through practice, with Verstappen comparing his car to a go-kart without suspension, not exactly the glowing review of the car that is leading the World Championship. In the end, Perez was unable to even get out of Q1, while Verstappen was simply unable to get higher than 6th. So the Red Bull car has shown signs that it isn't the fastest in some circumstances, and given the team is now really only fighting with one car rather than two, there must be at least some concern for the Constructors' Championship, given their rivals both have two strong drivers behind the wheel. The rise of the challengers. Last season there were 3 teams in the fight with Sergio Perez. Mercedes, Ferrari and McLaren were in the mix at different Grand Prix, as different circuits suited each of their cars. This season, it was Ferrari that took a positive step forward through the off-season. The Ferrari team's biggest challenge in 2023 was that despite having impressive one-lap pace, they could not convert those pole positions into race wins due to significant tyre wear, limiting their race pace. This was an issue that the team worked on and solved through the winter, and as early as testing they were showing signs that their new concept had worked. This progress was significant, and it would mean the Ferrari team would be capable of competing with Red Bull on a Sunday rather than a Saturday. McLaren's progression has come from the fact that there have been 2 seasons in a row where in-season upgrades have worked straight away, even on sprint race weekends where the team has limited testing time. The team have developed a system where they can bring the upgrades to the car as soon as possible, and their drivers have shown an excellent ability to adapt to their upgraded car and immediately deliver results. This is not always easy to come by. Many drivers and teams take time to get used to upgrades, and often these teams struggle to find correlation between what they see on track and what they saw in the simulator, and even experienced and successful teams like Mercedes can struggle with these types of issues. The progress of McLaren and Ferrari in 2024 has coincided with the challenges faced by Red Bull over the last 3 races. McLaren's upgrades in Miami and Ferrari's upgrades at Imola have meant that they've shown consistent pace through the last couple of races, and this has resulted in several drivers in the fight on both a Saturday and a Sunday. It must be said that Miami, Imola and Monaco are all circuits with several corners and limited overtaking opportunities. And when the sport returns to Canada, there will be a real test for Red Bull, as the team can take advantage of their top speed, which is typically one area that they come out on top. Right now, following the race in Monaco, the top 3 in the World Championship are Verstappen, Leclerc and Norris, 3 drivers from 3 different teams. Meanwhile, Sergio Perez is down in 5th in the World Championship, significantly off the pace of the leaders. In fact, the gap from Verstappen to Leclerc is less than the lead that the Dutchman had in 2022, when the World Championship was seen to be very close after 8 rounds. The momentum is shifting. The trajectories of the top 3 teams in Formula 1 is fascinating to watch. While Red Bull seems to have plateaued or even gone backwards in the hands of Sergio Perez, McLaren and Ferrari have progressed significantly so far this season. And for the first time since 2021, the fact that Red Bull have a driver pairing that has a significant differential has actually been exposed as a weakness. The fact that Ferrari and McLaren both have 2 drivers in the fight week in, week out, means that often Red Bull are putting themselves in a position where they're at risk of losing races that may come down to strategic decisions. Realistically, the Constructors' Championship has the potential to be incredibly competitive. The gap between Red Bull and Ferrari is now 24 points, and it feels likely that Ferrari could continue to outscore the reigning champions on a regular basis, considering how well both Charles Leclerc and Carlos Sainz are driving in 2024. With Red Bull under pressure for the first time in over a year, it'll be fascinating to see how the team responds to this new challenge. It's been reported that Sergio Perez is likely to receive a contract extension for 2025 to continue to race alongside Max Verstappen. While this ensures the team's main priority will remain with Verstappen, the vulnerabilities of having a second driver that is unable to match the Dutchman in the same machinery will likely become clear. Given the trajectories of the development of the top teams in the sport, it could be the case that Red Bull finds it difficult to fight one-handed against these other teams. This could especially be the case when Ferrari changed their driver lineup in 2025 to bring Hamilton in alongside Leclerc, which could be one of the strongest driver lineups in the sport's history. For me, the 2024 season is still Red Bull's to lose. When the sport returns to more traditional circuits, I'm sure that the team will regain the dominant form that they've been used to over the last 18 months. But the team is not as bulletproof as it was last year, and their lead in 2024 has been eroded incredibly quickly, considering the first few rounds of this season saw comfortable Red Bull 1-2 finishes. So it will be fascinating to see if these other teams can continue to take the fight to the top team in the sport, and hopefully even a real championship battle.